WNYC. Coming up in just a moment here on 93.9 FM and AM 820, it's Marketplace. We'll be back with more All Things Considered at 7 o'clock this evening. It's 72 degrees right now. There's a few clouds here and there. It's going to be a really nice night. In fact, temperatures in the mid-60s this evening. Really good weekend, too, actually. We're going to see highs tomorrow reach the low 80s in the afternoon, mid-80s on Sunday. It's going to be sunny throughout. Monday is going to be even hotter, highs approaching 90 degrees again. You're listening to WNYC on Friday at 6:30.
WNYC is supported by Hudson River Park, presenting its annual Blues Barbecue Festival Saturday, August 16th at Pier 76, starting at 1, with barbecue from local restaurants for purchase and bands on 2 stages. More at hudsonriverpark.org.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance with Snapshot. Learn more about Snapshot at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot not available in California or from all agents.
This is very not good. And I'm not just talking about the jobs numbers here either. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Solidigm. Today's AI ambitions require a different approach to storage. Solidigm offers solid-state storage solutions optimized for AI with higher capacities, greater speed, and energy efficiency. StorageForAI.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Rizdal. It is Friday today, August the 1st. Good as always to have you along, everybody. It is really important to be really clear about what happened today. We got that July jobs report this morning. As you know, 73,000 new jobs last month, along with sharp downward revisions for May and June. Not great. Not great at all. But then, hours later, President Trump fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, saying this afternoon, and I'm quoting him here, "In my opinion, today's jobs numbers were rigged in order to make Republicans and me look bad." You are, of course, entitled to your own opinion, Mr. President, but you are not entitled to your own facts. And the fact is that until today, there had been no reason to believe government economic data was being manipulated for political purposes. That is, as regular listeners know, more than I usually say to set up our Friday roundtable, but it is the policy of this program that context matters. Heather Long is chief economist at the Navy Federal Credit Union. Courtney Brown is at Axios. Hey, you two.
Hi, Kai.
Hey, Kai.
Heather, you get to go first, and I guess I just want your reaction to the news of the day.
I gasped when I saw it. It's unprecedented, and it raises a lot of alarm bells about the data integrity of the United States going forward. In the short term, the good, encouraging news, silver lining, if there is one, is that the deputy BLS commissioner will step in. He's been there over a decade in that role. And so I don't think we'll start questioning data integrity tomorrow. But look, there's going to come a point in the coming months when we start to see some good data. Mm-hmm. And everyone's going to be sitting there wondering, was this good data that was manipulated? And that doesn't help anyone.
So, Courtney, we had Martha Gimbel from the Yale Budget Lab on the program yesterday, and I asked her the specific question of whether there's any reason to believe, and this was in the context of data collection changing, right? Fewer resources, survey responses, all that. I asked her if there was any reason to believe up until yesterday that data was being manipulated. And she said absolutely not. And then this afternoon, after this news broke, she emailed me and said, "Hey, you remember that thing I said yesterday?" And I guess my question to you is, do you blame people for starting to think that maybe it's going to be a problem?
I don't. I don't blame people for starting to think that way. There are a few things happening here. The BLS is trying to do what it can with fewer resources. We know already that it is cutting back on its collection of data with respect to the CPI report. Mm-hmm. We know that response rates among all of its surveys that kind of compromise the important economic data we look at, response rates have been falling. What we cannot say is that there has been political manipulation of the data as President Trump has suggested. I spoke to his top economist this afternoon, Council of Economic Advisors Chair Stephen Miran. You know, he said that there needs to be some innovation on the part of the BLS to get around these issues and help address the massive revisions that we're seeing. But he stopped short of admitting that the problem was political. Yeah. He said that he believes what the numbers, what the BLS says as far as jobs growth is concerned.
Heather, talk to me about those revisions, because they were big, 250,000 over the past 2 months downward. That's a big deal.
It was certainly eye-popping, depending upon how you look at it, the biggest revision since the 1970s outside of April 2020, when everything was just impossible to measure. So obviously the headline number, 73,000 jobs added, that was pretty weak, weaker than expected. But then June revised down to 14,000. I mean, that's practically zero. And May, 19,000. And the big change there was really state and local government jobs. They kind of just disappeared in the reports. So almost all the jobs added in the past 3 months have come from healthcare sector. Without that, those three numbers would be negative. And so, look, I think what this reflects is a number of issues going on. Courtney talked about a few of them. I would just add on top of that we have lost a lot of immigrants in this country in the past few months, and down 1.5 million in the labor force that we know of. And that's made this really, really difficult to adjust seasonal adjustments, to do some of the normal statistical revisions that are done. That's not cooking the books. That's trying to get an accurate count from a survey.
Yeah, it's important to say here, just so everybody's clear on this, and I don't mean you two, I mean everybody who's listening, revisions are normal, and they happen, and this is what you want, because that's how you get verifiable and trustworthy data. Courtney, let me ask you this. So Chair Powell has said all the time, and he said it in his press conference on Wednesday, look, the labor market is holding up. I wonder, do you think, had he had today's news on Wednesday, that the rate cut decision might have been different?
I'm going to spend the next week, I think, trying to track down members of the Federal Open Market Committee and ask this very question, because I think it's such a good one. What if you would have this data on Wednesday? What would have changed on your outlook about the economy? Because as you say, Fed Chair Powell sounded like he was thinking the economy was fine, which in all fairness, it kind of did look fine before today. This report completely flipped our understanding of the economy's health on its head. And we have concerns today that we just didn't have on Wednesday.
I wonder, Heather, what you think of this, that President Trump is now likely to get his rate cut in the September meeting. It won't be anywhere near what he wants, right? So let's be obvious about that. But he's going to get it for the wrong reasons.
You mean in the sense that he's going to get it because the economy looks weaker?
Right. The economy's weakening, and no incumbent president wants a weaker economy.
Yes, I fully agree. And you're right. It looks now like there could be a September rate cut, an October rate cut, and a December rate cut. I mean, we'll see. A lot can happen. But certainly one of the things that stood out to me in today's jobs report, besides what we were just speaking about, those revisions, was a lot of sectors are actually doing layoffs. It's not just the federal government. Warehouse is down, retail sector is down, professional business, even manufacturing sector that we're trying to revive, has lost jobs in the last 3 months now. And that does, really send a red alarm. You know me, I've been calling this a frozen job market for months, and now I'd call it a red alarm job market. So yes, it's time to cut in September. But we saw this playbook last summer. Right. Almost the exact same thing happened. There was regret they didn't cut in July, and they got on it in September.
Courtney, let me ask you this, and I don't want to get too inside baseball, but much was made on Wednesday of the two dissents, right, from Waller and Bowman, two governors, right, members of the Board of Governors as opposed to regional presidents. First time in 30 years, whatever, the two have dissented. How big a deal do you, Federal Reserve expert, thinks that is?
You know what I think? I think dissents are healthy. I've come around to that idea. So I think it's totally fine that top Fed officials are saying, actually, I disagree with this. I'm going to stake a claim here. But what it signals is that we are entering a different period. We are entering a period in which these decisions might get, more difficult when it comes to what the Fed is deciding to do with respect to interest rates, and kind of thinking about the labor market weakness on one hand and the still very persistent inflationary pressures that are evident across the economy. So disagreement is fine. And I think that Fed Governor Christopher Waller, who was appointed by Trump, both we should say were appointed by Trump, they've kind of staked this, they've put their ideas out there that they think a cut should have happened this week. They are worried about the downsides to the labor market. Fed Governor Waller expressed that clearly. And I don't know, maybe he was right.
Yeah. It was interesting to read those two dissents. They put out statements today, I guess. Heather, last question to you. You got about a minute, and I want to draw on your expertise as the chief economist at NFCU. You've got all kinds of data, I'm sure, that comes to you. Talk to me about the general overall health of this economy. What are you seeing, and where does that leave your gut feeling about the economy?
Yeah, it really looks a lot like a K-shaped economy again, where the top is doing really, really well and the bottom has been struggling. And now we're starting to see the middle struggle some. What I mean by that, our data shows that, for instance, credit card spending generally growing for people earning $170,000 or above, but really flatlining or even pulling back for people in the middle and more moderate income. Another one that really stands out to me is a lot of people are increasing their savings. And I don't mean in their long-term savings account. I mean it's literally saving more cash in their checking account and using their debit card instead of their credit card because they don't want to run up more debt. And it's just these signs of caution, abundance of caution.
K-shaped economy. We haven't heard that in a long while. Heather Long, she's chief economist at Navy Federal Credit Union. Courtney Brown is at Axios. Thanks, you two, for your wisdom.
Thanks, guys.
Happy
Have a
weekend.
nice weekend. You too. Ugly from the jump on Wall Street today, although not as ugly as I kind of thought it would be. We will have the details when we do the numbers. Tariffs, as we all know, right? We know that. They are not, in fact, paid by the country upon which they are imposed. They are paid by importers, American importers for the purposes of this discussion, which means the costs are ultimately borne by American consumers. And all along the supply chain, from ports of entry to store shelves, are businesses that have to decide how much of those import taxes to pass along and how much to absorb. There's some research out from the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute that shows the degree to which a business is exposed to the Trump tariffs depends a lot on its size. And it turns out mid-sized companies, not the really big ones, not the really small ones, mid-sized companies are disproportionately vulnerable. Marketplace's Justin Ho said about finding out why.
Argonaut Manufacturing Services is a pharmaceutical manufacturer based in Carlsbad, California. It makes drugs and diagnostic tests for other companies. And depending on the product it's making, the company imports chemicals and other raw materials.
Really, all over Europe, a number of materials come from China.
Wayne Woodard is the company's founder.
If you look at the whole supply chain of the raw materials that go into those products we buy for our customers, they're generally speaking global.
Which means the company is exposed to all kinds of tariffs. Woodard says that's not only because it has to import its raw goods. It's also because as a mid-sized drug manufacturer, Argonaut doesn't have as much leverage with its suppliers compared to bigger drug companies, which have the scale to negotiate discounts.
If you were going to use thousands and thousands of kilograms of this material, you're going to have a different negotiation with the raw material suppliers than the small and mid-sized companies.
There's no official definition of a mid-sized business. The J.P. Morgan Chase Institute says mid-sized companies' annual revenues can range anywhere from $10 million to $1 billion.
So think, more than 10 or 15 employees, but not like the big public companies that you hear about all the time.
That's Chris Wheat. He's president of the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute. And he says mid-sized companies also have disadvantages compared to smaller ones. That's because small companies often buy their supplies from the same places consumers do, big retailers, which are more likely to absorb the cost of tariffs. But Wheat says mid-sized companies typically buy directly from importers.
If you're a medium-sized business and you're buying something more specialized, or you really need to get it from a particular supplier, there's quite a bit of exposure.
The JP Morgan Chase Institute found that mid-sized companies with the most tariff exposure include chemical manufacturers. Think drug companies like Argonaut Manufacturing Services. Also, auto parts manufacturers and retailers.
Our primary business is retail, grocery, specializing in Asian food.
Chris Duong runs Hawaii Supermarket, a grocery store near Los Angeles that sells products from China, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia. He says some of his suppliers are passing along tariff surcharges as high as 20 and 30%, especially on the cheaper imports he sells, items that cost less than $10 a piece.
So like sauces or seasoning packets, a lot of the dried goods, just because the margin's already so thin on those.
Duong says he's doing what he can to avoid having to raise his prices. He's trying to negotiate with his suppliers to lower those tariff charges. He's also reducing his profit margins. Duong says the fear is that consumers just won't buy those products if they're too expensive.
On the retail end, we kind of know how price sensitive certain products are. If you take too big a price increase, then the demand will just fall off a cliff.
But absorbing the cost of tariffs can have consequences for the economy. The JP Morgan Chase Institute says mid-sized businesses are responsible for about a third of private sector employment.
Our company is about 35 people.